The last thing my grandfather ever put in my hands was a cheap pocket watch that didn't even work. He pressed it into my palm 2 days before he died, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't let your mother throw that away." At the time, I thought it was just another strange old man moment from someone whose body was failing faster than his mind could admit. I had no idea that 6 years later, that useless watch would lead me to a locked train station locker, a woman who burst into tears the moment she saw my face, and the truth about my grandfather that split my family in half. My name is Daniel, and for most of my life I believed my grandfather, Walter Hayes, was exactly who everybody said he was. Quiet, predictable, retired machinist, Korean War veteran who never talked much about the war. A man who liked black coffee, crossword puzzles, and fixing things that other people would have thrown out. He lived in the same small Ohio house for 43 years. He drove the same truck until the floor rusted through. If there was ever a man less likely to have secrets, it was him. He helped raise me, though. My dad left when I was 9, and my mom worked double shifts at a nursing home, so after school I'd end up at Grandpa Walter's place almost every day. He taught me how to sand a piece of wood until it felt like glass, how to change brake pads, how to tell if someone was lying just by how fast they answered a question. He didn't hug much, didn't say "I love you" much either. But if my bike chain snapped, he fixed it before I even asked. If I had a science project, he stayed up until midnight helping me build it. That was his version of love. When he got sick, it happened fast. Lung cancer. By the time the doctors found it, they were already talking in careful voices. My mom was a wreck, but Grandpa stayed stubbornly normal, still paid bills on time, still shaved every morning, still acted annoyed when people hovered. That day in hospice, I was 24, sitting beside him while the TV played muted weather reports no one was watching. He reached into the bedside drawer, took out that pocket watch, and gave it to me like it mattered more than anything else he owned. It was scratched, heavy, silver-colored, but probably not real silver, with a dent near the hinge. On the back, there was an engraved set of initials, TM, not even his. That's one reason I never thought much about it. Why give me a broken watch with somebody else's initials? After the funeral, life moved the way it always does, fast enough to bury questions. My mom sold his truck, donated half his clothes, and boxed up the rest of his things. The watch ended up in a drawer in my apartment with dead batteries, spare keys, and random receipts. Every now and then I'd see it and think, I should get this repaired. I never did. Then 6 years later, my mom called me because she was finally selling Grandpa's house. I drove over on a Saturday to help clear the garage. We spent hours hauling paint cans, cracked flower pots, and old tools into piles. Around sunset, I found a wooden tackle box tucked behind a workbench. Inside were fishing lures, nails, and folded shop rags. At the very bottom, hidden under a false piece of wood I only noticed because one corner lifted, there was a tiny envelope with my name on it. Not Daniel in my mom's handwriting, in his. My chest actually tightened when I saw it. Inside was a single index card. On it, in Grandpa's neat block letters, it said, "If you kept the watch, have it opened by someone who knows what they're doing. Do not take it to a jeweler in town. Go to Bellamy Clock Repair, Cincinnati. Ask for Ruth." That was it. No explanation. No love, Grandpa. Nothing. I didn't tell my mom right away. I don't even know why. Maybe because something about it felt private. Or maybe because for the first time, the watch stopped feeling sentimental and started feeling deliberate. The next Tuesday, I took a day off and drove to Cincinnati. Bellamy Clock Repair was in an old brick storefront squeezed between a shoe repair shop and a tax office. The sign looked 30 years old. Inside, every wall was ticking. Big clocks, tiny clocks, cuckoo clocks, brass desk clocks. The noise was almost unsettling. A woman in her late 60s came out from the back. Thin, gray hair tied up, sharp eyes. I asked if she was Ruth. The second I set the watch on the counter, her face changed. Not surprise, exactly. more like recognition mixed with dread. She didn't touch it right away. "Where did you get this?" "It was my grandfather's." "What was his name?" "Walter Hayes." Her hand froze in midair. That was the first moment I understood this was not going to be some sweet family story. This was something else. She locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed even though it was barely noon, and told me to come into the back room. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the clocks. Ruth used a tiny blade to pry open the inner casing. I'd never even realized there was an inner casing. Inside, hidden behind the gears, was a strip of tightly folded paper no bigger than a matchstick. "You were supposed to find this sooner," she said quietly. I unfolded it with shaking fingers. It was a list of numbers and letters. C19 41182 LK Union Terminal. "That's it?" I asked. Ruth looked at me for a long time. "Your grandfather told me if anyone came with that watch, I was only to open it. Nothing else." "Nothing else? You clearly know something." She looked miserable. "I know enough to tell you this mattered to him, and enough to tell you he wasn't always the man you knew." I asked what that meant, but she just shook her head. "Go to Union Terminal." Now I had questions stacked on questions. What was C19? A locker? Why 1982? Who was LK? And how did a quiet machinist from Ohio have a secret messenger in Cincinnati? Union Terminal still had a locker area in the lower concourse, though most of it looked unused. I felt ridiculous asking an employee about C19, like I was acting in a bad thriller. But the older guy at the desk checked a map and told me there was a retired bank of long-term lockers no longer in service. He led me to a fenced-off wall. Locker C19 was still there, dusty and dented. "Those haven't been opened in forever," he said. The combination lock attached to it had 3 rotating number bands. My brain snagged on 41182. I tried 41182. It didn't work. Then I tried 411. The lock clicked open. Inside was a manila envelope and a cassette tape. The envelope contained a photograph of my grandfather, 20 maybe, standing beside a woman I'd never seen before. She was beautiful in a severe kind of way, dark hair pinned up, one hand resting on his arm like they belonged to each other. On the back was written, "Lena and W, Chicago, 1961. There was also a birth certificate for a girl named Lucy Catherine Moore. Date of birth, November 3rd, 1962. Father, Walter Hayes." I sat on the floor right there in that dusty station corridor and stared at the paper until the words blurred. My grandfather had another child. My mom had a sister she never knew existed. That alone would have been enough to turn my entire understanding of him upside down. But then there was the cassette tape. I had to buy an old cassette player from a thrift store on the way home just to hear it. His voice on that tape was thinner than I remembered, probably recorded near the end of his life. "If you're hearing this," he said, "then I ran out of time or courage. Probably both." He explained that before he met my grandmother, he had lived in Chicago and been engaged to a woman named Lena Moore. They had a daughter, Lucy. Then, according to him, Lena disappeared. Not died. Disappeared. One morning she was gone, and a week later Walter was told by 2 men he believed were connected to Lena's family that he was never to contact the child again. He said he was young, broke, and scared. He tried for a while, but every door shut in his face. Then he was drafted, came back years later, and by then there was no trace of them. I listened to that tape twice. It felt unbelievable. But if it was true, then the biggest secret in our family wasn't an affair. It was abandonment. A whole hidden branch of us erased. Still, something bothered me. If he'd lost them in the early 60s, why hide the birth certificate in a locker in 1982? Why ask Ruth to hold part of the clue? Why wait until he was dying to set me on this path? I called my mom that night and asked if Grandpa had ever lived in Chicago. She went quiet. Then she said, "Why are you asking me that?" Too fast, too defensive. So I drove to her house. At first she denied knowing anything. Then she started crying before I'd even shown her the birth certificate. That was the moment I realized she had known at least part of it. She admitted that when she was 17, she found letters in Grandma's dresser from a woman named Lena. She confronted her mother, and Grandma told her there had been another family before them. But Walter had been tricked, and the child was gone. Grandma made my mom swear never to mention it again. Said bringing it up would destroy the family, and there was nothing anyone could do after all those years. I felt sick. So all this time he knew where to start looking. No, my mom said. That's the thing, he didn't. Your grandmother burned the letters. That should have been the answer. Tragic, ugly, finished. But it wasn't, because one detail kept gnawing at me. The locker date, 1982. Why would he store those items 2 decades later if the trail had gone cold, unless he found something new? That was the false ending I almost accepted, that Grandpa had a lost daughter and spent his life regretting it. Sad, simple, believable. Then Ruth called me. I broke a promise, she said. Come back. When I got there, she handed me a small ledger page she'd taken from an old file box after I left. Your grandfather came here 3 times, she said. Not once. The last time was in 1982. He was with a little girl. I just stared at her. She was maybe 20, not a child. Brown hair, same eyes as yours. Lucy. So he had found her. Everything shifted. Ruth said she overheard enough to know the reunion had gone badly. The girl was angry. She kept saying, "You don't get to come back now." Walter left the watch for safekeeping after that visit and told Ruth if anyone ever came asking, they should only get the clue if he was dead. He looked like a man who'd already lost something twice, she said. Now I had a new question that swallowed all the others. If he found Lucy in 1982, why didn't he tell anyone? Why hide her instead of bringing her into the family? I hired an online records researcher. It took 2 weeks and every day dragged. We found a marriage license for a Lucy Catherine Moore in Illinois, then a death record under a different last name in Oregon from 9 years earlier. But there was more. An obituary listed a daughter, Emily Kessler. That was the LK from the note, I thought at first, but it wasn't. It was Lucy Kessler, after marriage. Emily was alive and living outside Portland. I wrote her a letter because showing up cold felt cruel. 3 days later, she called. Her voice was careful. Did my grandfather used to carry a silver pocket watch with initials that weren't his? I couldn't speak for a second. Yes. She exhaled shakily. Then I know who you are. I flew to Portland that weekend. Emily met me in a coffee shop and looked so much like my mother around the eyes that it was almost painful. She brought a cardboard box. Inside were photos, cards, and one sealed letter in my grandfather's handwriting addressed to Lucy. Emily told me her mother had kept everything, and then came the second, bigger truth. My grandfather had not abandoned Lucy in the way he made it sound on the tape. Lena's family hadn't kidnapped her. They had pressured Walter, yes, but Lena had left because she found out he was working as an informant for federal agents against a violent crew stealing military equipment through rail yards in Chicago. He'd gotten close to them through his machine shop work. According to Emily, one of the men involved was Lena's brother. When the operation blew up, 2 men were killed, 1 disappeared, and Walter was told to vanish for his own safety. Lena took Lucy and ran before the retaliation reached them. She believed staying away was the only way to keep the child alive. I sat there frozen, trying to connect that man to the grandfather who complained if his toast was too dark. Emily slid the sealed letter toward me. My mom never opened it. She said if he wanted to explain, he should have done it to her face. My hands shook as I opened it. In the letter, Grandpa admitted he had found Lucy in 1982 after years of off-and-on searching. He wanted to tell her everything, but when he met her, she already knew enough to hate him. Not because he disappeared, because his testimony had sent Lena's brother to prison, where he later died. Lena never forgave him. Lucy grew up hearing that Walter chose the government over her family. Walter believed that if he pushed his way in, he would only pass the damage down another generation. So he stepped back again. Cowardice, he called it. Protection, he called it. Even in his own letter, he couldn't decide which. Emily looked at me and said, "My mother didn't hate him as much as she wanted to. That was the problem. She kept the watch story her whole life." I asked what watch story. She smiled sadly. "The pocket watch wasn't his. It was Lena's brother's. Your grandfather took it the night everything went bad. He kept it as a reminder of the worst thing he ever did, and the family it cost him. That wrecked me more than anything else. Not that he had secrets, that he lived beside us all those years carrying a physical weight of guilt in his pocket and never put it down." A month later, my mom agreed to meet Emily. I thought it would be warm or cinematic or healing right away. It wasn't. It was awkward and raw and full of things no one knew how to say. They sat across from each other at my kitchen table, studying each other's faces like mirrors from different decades. My mom cried first. Emily didn't. Not then. She asked, "Did he ever talk about us?" My mom whispered, "No. But now I think that's because he couldn't." There was anger in the room, too. Anger at Grandpa, at Grandma for burying it, at all the years stolen by silence. But there was also this strange relief, because grief is easier to carry when it finally has a shape. In the months that followed, our family changed in ways I'm still trying to understand. My mom gained a niece and lost the clean version of her father she'd protected her whole life. Emily got answers, but not the kind that make you feel better. We shared photos, medical histories, birthdays, recipes, tiny ordinary things. The kind of inheritance nobody thinks about until it's gone. And me? I had to rebuild my image of the man who raised me. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a monster either. He was a young man who made choices inside fear and pressure and violence, then spent the rest of his life trying to survive the consequences of them. He loved us. I know that. But love isn't always brave. Sometimes it hides. Sometimes it delays. Sometimes it arrives decades late inside a broken watch. A year after meeting Emily, we buried a small plaque beside my grandfather's grave with Lucy's name on it. She died before any of this came back together, and that still hurts more than I can explain. She was so close. He found her, lost her, and never found the courage to cross the final distance. Before we left the cemetery, my mom put the pocket watch on the grass for a moment, just set it there between the headstones, and looked at it. "I used to think he was simple," she said. "I looked at the name engraved on the back, the initials of a dead man whose life had tangled with ours long before I was born." "No," I said, "just quiet." I still have the watch. I got it repaired, but I never wind it for long. I keep it in my desk now where I can see it, not as a family treasure. Not exactly, more like evidence. Proof that the people who raise us are never only the version we get. They are also the versions that existed before us. The ones shaped by fear, by love, by shame, by things they buried because they thought burying them was mercy. Sometimes I wonder whether Grandpa gave me that watch because he trusted me, or because he knew I'd be the one stubborn enough to keep asking after everyone else had decided the past was safer unopened. Maybe both. But I know this: the last gift he gave me wasn't the watch itself. It was the choice he never managed to make while he was alive, to finally let the truth out.